Okay, so hey guys, and welcome back to another Axel 72 video. And in today's video, I'm going to be giving my prediction for the Tiara Brown versus Emma Gongora fight. And so, if you are new around here and you haven't yet subscribed, please do so. Like the video if you do indeed like the video, and feel free to join the Patreon as well. I will, I'm always taking requests for any kind of combat sporting related content in which you guys want to see. There's been plenty of videos that have come as a result of the Patreon, and there is a good selection of members on there, which I really do appreciate, and the link will be in the description if you are wanting to join. And again, like I say, thank you very much. But let's get straight into this one though. So of course, this is for that of the WBC World Featherweight title, in which everybody has kind of gotten used to the name of Tiara Brown now as a result of course, what she did in Australia a few months ago now, where she went and beat Skye Nicolson in her home country, and, caused that quite shocking upset, to be completely honest, where, Skye Nicolson was on such a high. She was able to be the first woman to be able to be on a Riyadh season show. She was, really the poster woman for boxing for Matchroom, and Tiara Brown came along as a mandatory opponent in which not really too many people had heard about, and wasn't really expected to go out there and do a crazy amount. Of course, Overtime had promoted her relatively well, but like I say, still not a massive name. Other names, like Amanda Serrano was more linked with a Skye Nicolson than somebody like a Tiara Brown. But Tiara Brown went out there, she showed her rugged, tough nature and was able to outwork, outmuscle, and make Skye Nicolson more often than not fight her fight, and that inevitably got her the close split decision victory, which of course I was very happy with. Of course, upsetting the odds, but also in the home country as well on the home show, and I was happy with it because the judges scored it right. And I've got nothing against Skye Nicolson, but when you are in somebody's home country, it's often very difficult to be able to get the nod to go your way, especially, home country, their promotion as well. Like I say, all the things were kind of in the favour for Nicolson to get the nod. But like I say, she managed to get the win. She shows that she is a tough, rugged challenger for anybody. And, she has been also the only fighter to be able to slow down Skye Nicolson. And of course, that win has aged well as a result. Skye Nicolson has moved down in weight, and she has been able to walk through a couple easy opponents so far and get 2 stoppages back to back, and is now, not too far, maybe one fight, maybe even next could be in line 2 fights for a world title herself. So like I say, it's a fight in which definitely has aged well, and, I feel like she's definitely somebody who can bring some excitement to the division, Tiara Brown. I mean, she's a physical presence who talks well as well. She seemed to be able to get into the head of Skye Nicolson a little bit and, make her want to fight a physical fight and stand toe to toe. And, you can tell that she is, like I say, that rugged kind of character, and like I say, really is somebody who's willing to, go to war with anybody. And I think, like I say, if she does have any more kind of rivalry matchups, I think she could really create, like I say, some excitement into the division. As a whole, though, I do feel like this is a bit of a downgrade for Tiara Brown, but I suppose it's not really too much of a surprise as she is coming off such a high. But she's now co-main eventing on an Overtime Boxing event, and Overtime Boxing, like I say, I feel like do a good job of promoting on social media, but for the most part, their events aren't big enough to have a world champion realistically on them just yet. I believe Tiara Brown is now currently the only world champion they have on their roster, and until they get some more bigger names like that, they've got a few big names, but until they get a world champion, a couple more world champions, their events aren't big enough in my opinion to really push her too much along. They can do a good job with the socials, which they do, but again, I feel like she could have a little bit more, maybe, of course, if she worked with somebody like a Most Valuable Promotions. But she's a co-main event on this card, on the Gorham versus Alamo card, which is a just an IBF North American Boxing fight. Again, it's nothing too major, but still she's getting more active, getting back out there again. And I think, like I say, it's still no surprise that it is a bit of a voluntary. I believe this is because she is somebody who is a new champion. She was able to kind of get a hit and run type of win to be able to win the title, and now she has to be able to build herself as a champion and have a few fights where maybe, they're not unifications, maybe they're not the biggest of names in the division, but like I say, are still able to build her up nicely and, like I say, build that confidence in her as a world champion. Somebody in Gongora, though, she is still going to be a tough test. She got matched very tough early on in her professional career. When you look at her resume, you can see a couple of losses within her first two fights. And again, like I say, she got matched very tough early on. She went in just her second professional fight against Steve Mosley, who is the wife of, or at least at the time was the wife of Tony Yoka, and also at the same time is a world. No, it is an Olympic, I believe, gold medalist as well. So again, to have that in your second professional fight, to take that fight on short notice as well, I'm sure Gongora learned a tremendous amount in that fight. And, this is, of course, still a clear step down in opposition for Tiara Brown. But Gongora is on a good winning streak herself. She's had, multiple tests against upcoming contenders. And, with her being 32 years of age compared to Brown being 37, perhaps she might, have a little bit more to give. And perhaps, at the same time, somebody like Tiara Brown may be kind of a bit overconfident coming into this fight. I feel like Skye Nicolson, in my opinion, was too overconfident coming into the fight against Tiara Brown. Like I say, these other big names were linked with her, and I think she did definitely underestimate Tiara Brown. And, that was her undoing in the end. And, I think Tiara Brown perhaps could have that happen in a fight here because, like I say, Gongora is definitely a very live opponent. She herself, Gongora, has another fight, had another fight, which was her last defeat against Caroline Vieira, who is currently WBC mandatory and is actively calling for Tiara Brown. So if I was Overtime Boxing, I would have Vieira there in the venue ready to come into the ring and, sell a bit of a face-off between the two of them. And again, like I say, might be able to provide a bit of entertainment there because from what I've heard, Vieira is there kind of actively trying to get herself a title shot as well. And like I say, she's been able to get a win over Gongora. So if Brown does that, I think it's definitely a good step and a good matchup to make. To speak about both fighters individually, though, Brown is a fighter who really doesn't give in. I think that was showcased in that fight against Skye Nicolson. Skye Nicolson was able to have, quite a bit of success in the kind of early 2 to 3 rounds where she was able to fight, as we are typically used to seeing her fight, on the back foot, poking out a jab and moving. And, Brown could have easily just wilted away in that fight like plenty of, previous Skye Nicolson opponents had. But she was able to showcase, that she wasn't willing to give in, that the later rounds were there for the taking, and that's what she took. She chips away well and keeps that damage consistent. She, like I say, was able to make her fight, if that makes sense. And, she's able to do that well by, I don't know if that's getting in her head or just, like I say, being that more of a physical presence. You don't want to get bullied by your opponents, and that's what can make you fight your opponent's fight. She is able to win exchanges for the most part. She walks you down and has a nice high guard as well. She doesn't respect her opponents, but again, at the same time, I wouldn't say she's a greedy or undisciplined fighter. She uses her physicality well, and I think she can stop movement well with wide kind of predicting hooks. Sometimes throwing a wide hook isn't the best because, again, it can put you in a bad position. It can leave you vulnerable and a bit more open, but with somebody who is moving around and circling around like, Skye Nicolson, but also like Gongora likes to do, stopping momentum and that movement with a wide hook that can kind of predict and, trap you in a corner a bit more, that's where she can have success because you either get caught with a shot, in which Skye Nicolson did on multiple occasions, and get out of the corner, or you get resulted in, staying in the corner because you don't want to get clipped with that wide predicting hook. She improves throughout the fights. She throws a lot with intent. She's got good shot variety, and when she goes to the body, to the head in combinations, it looks really nice. When she gets you on the rope, she's able to have plenty of success. She can suddenly change gear, in which I saw in that fight. She has a work rate which is relentless and bullish, and inevitably she is kind of able to just not let you breathe when you are fighting her. Negatives about her, I think she can be beaten to the punch. I think, perhaps the speed of Gongora, like I say, might be able to have a bit of success in her favour at times. She's not the most technical, and again, her footwork, her defensive movement, these are things in which I've seen as weaknesses. She can be turned and moved by opponents. I don't think that Gongora is quite skilled enough to be able to do that too much. She can struggle to find range at a mid-range, and again, if Gongora can keep this at a mid-range where she may be able to do so, then she will have to work hard to be able to get in close. But again, like I say, chipping away, breaking away Tiara Brown. She can square up and can lunge in. Again, like I say, the footwork was a bit of a problem in my opinion, and maybe could have been punished by somebody who had a little bit more power, a little bit more intent in her punches than somebody like a Skye Nicolson, because, like I say, she was definitely squaring up a lot when she was throwing against Skye. She does struggle to get her timing down, and I think she can, struggle to follow off her opponent's shots. So if her opponent lands a shot, she can't necessarily always be able to land her shot, which she often tries to throw in. It does mean that, like I say, she's then vulnerable to get countered from the counter, if that makes sense. She doesn't fight off the back foot the best in my opinion. She can walk onto shots, she can be flat-footed, she can lead with her head as bit as well, which did seem to be a bit of a problem. She can be made to smother. She was able, she was, still able to have a bit of success in the kind of clinch with Skye Nicolson, but it definitely was a bit more of a messier fight when she was made to smother, and she couldn't really get her hands free too well, and I think she has a bit of a lack of feints and setup as a whole. Gongora, as a fighter, she can fight on the back foot. I think she is more willing to go on the back foot than that of Tiara Brown, which might be a bad thing, but again, like I say, she can fight on the back foot. I think she can launch out to kind of keep a bit of distance. She'll launch herself in, launch herself out, and it is difficult to time her. She's got a bit of a jerky style, which again, I think can be a bit awkward. Again, launching yourself in isn't necessarily something in which I'd recommend, but, like I say, can cause herself to be quite awkward to time, because she does come in with quite a bit of speed and explosiveness. She circles off well, and of course she's able to do that well, and I think consistently do that well throughout the fight, with in general not overall bad defensive movement. I think it is good defensive movement, and I think there is similarities there to Skye Nicolson to an extent. She maintains the distance quite well, and she is actually quite difficult to get in close with, because she throws a tremendous amount of straight shots when she is throwing. She's got good speed of hands, she's got a consistent work rate and a high work rate as well. She can definitely frustrate. I think perhaps you could definitely frustrate in this fight Tiara Brown if things aren't going well for Tiara. She doesn't actually have the worst of footwork in the way of working angles and going to the body. There was, I've seen a bit of times in which she's able to pivot and kind of use that footwork a little bit to be able to actually use it offensively, which is nice. I just would like to see a little bit more. And of course, I think she has showcased in her fights that she's also willing to give her all, just like we've seen Tiara Brown do. Negatives about her, I think she can be a little bit limited with mainly just a 1-2 in which she's throwing, unlike, Tiara Brown, who I feel like definitely throws a better variety of shots. She can fall over her front feet a bit when she's lunging in. She can duck her head down. She can be pulling back with her chin in the air quite often. And again, if she's doing that whilst moving, that's where the wide hook might be able to come in and land from Tiara. She can rush in kind of onto punishment and rush in onto shots. She probably is, like I say, the more willing to be on the back foot and will invite that pressure much more, which of course will lead into Brown's hands. She has the messier work. She's a bit more of an arm puncher. She can even jump into her shots, which again can be reckless. She has lesser power. She can get caught with overhands, and that kind of seems to increase throughout, where she's getting caught more and more with them shots, and I do believe she does take quite a bit more punishment than that of Tiara Brown. Who do I think is going to win? I think that Tiara Brown is going to be able to win, but I think it is going to be another close split decision in my opinion. Again, I think Tiara Brown is in with a bit of a similar opponent to an extent to that of Skye Nicolson. Obviously, she's not as polished, she's not as neat, she's not as tidy, but she's going to circle on the back foot, and I think that's been seen in her fights. And she's going to try and, rush in with the straight shots. It will be interesting to see how Tiara Brown gets her timing down, which, like I say, I feel like she has struggled with in the past. And also at the same time, if she can, get in close herself, I think she'll have success, like I say, with them wide hooks. I think she'll be able to stalk her down and be able to land her own shots at times. How much will she be able to keep Gongora on the ropes will be a question, but I still do think it will be enough with the home crowd advantage as well, and the fact that she is, of course, the world champion, and also the one on the front foot who's going to be causing, the damage. I think she is going to be able to land, like I say, the more significant shots as well, and inevitably win via a close split decision, which might be a surprising thing, saying that, of course, I probably would, expect her to be thinking that she'll be able to make easier work of her than, of course, she did Skye Nicolson. But again, I think this is still going to be a tough fight. Then who she goes on to fight next, I mean, I've talked about the Vieira matchup as a possibility. That would be a great, fight to then move on to, and I think it would be a good progression fight. And I don't feel like it's time just yet for Tiara Brown to go in against another world champion. But again, if you look at the other world champions, Mike is probably the best option in my opinion as the IBF champion. That would probably be the matchup in which would sell the best and could definitely be made into an entertaining fight. Or, Sarah Mahfoud, of course, an opponent of Skye Nicolson, who Skye beat easily, but, that could be another good, stepping stone fight. Somebody who has fought a lot of the top fighters and is coming off a win in more recent times. Again, that could be a good fight there to be made. But yeah, that is it for today's video. Hope you did enjoy. Like the video if you did, like the video, subscribe if you're new, and thanks for watching.